That was two very relevant talks that set up our panel, our next panel, Innovative Approaches to University and Industry Collaboration. And our panel moderator is Sathuraman Panchanathan. I'm sure I mangled the last name, but Panch, known to his, also known as Panch to his friends and colleagues. All right.
Good morning to all of you. So, thank you. My name is Sethuraman Panchanathan. People call me Punch. And this will be the most difficult thing that you'll hear today. And you know why my name is shortened that way. So, welcome to the Industry University panel. This is a fantastic segue to what the talk that we heard just prior to this panel. I think if there is a time for university and industry to work together closely, this is it. Because there are many, many factors that are influencing how universities evolve into the future. And one of them clearly is, what is your contribution as a university to the regional economic development? We are all being challenged. In my role, for example, as Executive Vice President of Research, I'm also now doing economic development, entrepreneurship, innovation. All of these things are part of the portfolios of my peers. And primarily because of the fact that this is the future of how the universities are going to make an impact and therefore justify the resources that the public, in my case, the state universities, where the public are investing in these universities, as well as making sure that we are providing the trained workforce for the success of those companies, as well as getting startups and ideas out of the university, and also facilitating ideas outside the university to come and leverage the university to create a fantastic startup ecosystem. So whatever that might be, and advancing your research. Now, the federal funding is flat, if not going down. I hope it is flat and not going down, but the tea leaves, as you can see, we can read them, and where we are heading and trending. So which means that if there is a time again where we need to work with industry to advance the aspirations of the university, and more importantly, contribute in terms of societal impact, we need to work with industry very closely. So there are many, many, many other reasons. I don't want to belabor the point here, but therefore, this panel is very timely, this topic is very timely, and we've got an outstanding panel here of university leaders and industry leaders, as well as a startup community and venture capital presence here, which is the best panel that we could ask for. So what I'm going to do is the following. We will reserve some time for your questions. So this is going to be the format of the panel. We're going to have the panelists introduce themselves first, and then in 5 minutes describe their vision for what they think the best university-industry collaboration environment can be, and reflect on their own experiences, each one of them. And then we'll follow that up with some questions that we will have for the panelists, and then I'm going to open the floor out for all of you to engage with the panelists to get best value from this panel. Okay, so that's the format. So why don't we get started with Keith?
Good morning. I'm Keith Muyong. I'm the Chancellor at Washington State University Tri-Cities. We're located about 3 hours from Seattle, 3 hours from Portland, and I actually have a huge strategic advantage. I have a national laboratory, which is probably one of the largest producers of intellectual property in Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, essentially right next to our campus. So, you know, my experience is really timely in terms of this panel because, you know, I've worked both on the East Coast and the West Coast, and I've seen basically two very different collaborative industrial models. And I'll talk a little bit about, you know, what I call West Coast innovation. If you look at the West Coast, it's really interesting because we have the I-5 corridor, which, you know, stretches from San Diego all the way to Seattle area. And when you look at it, you have a number of tremendous assets that have been created. So when you look at Seattle, you know, I like to say it's a biotech industrial complex where you have the University of Washington really creating and leading the innovation in that space. Then you look at Portland. Portland is really an organic culture where you have the Silicon Forest, which really has no true university partner, but partners tremendously across the nation to create their innovation. Then as you move down the I-5 corridor, you talk about the San Francisco, the Bay Area, of course. That's the Stanford, UC Berkeley. The UCs start to really have a tremendous impact in terms of innovation, entrepreneurship. And then when you look at Los Angeles, where I worked and lived for about 8 years, it's a really interesting ecosystem. And one of the ways that I like to characterize or look at industry-university relations is to say, the first thing you always have to look at is, what is the organic opportunity? What is it that you're trying to define? So whether it's in the case of the opportunities when you have a medical center and an engineering school, like in the case of VCU, or when you have this great technological innovation for manufacturing in the Midwest, you have to have that organic opportunity. And one of the things, Panch, you said earlier was you talked about regional. You know, one of the things that's happening in this space is, how do you impact your region? Because in terms of state public universities especially, we have to justify our existence all the time as it relates to our space and our place. And so when you look at the innovations, whether it be in California, Oregon, Washington as examples, you know, the bottom line is it's usually based around a regional economic base. Then what I think occurs is then you have these great individuals who, you know, create the technologies, who create the startup companies, who kind of move you along the curve. But what really needs to happen is a collectivism occurs. So when you look at the West Coast, one of the things that's really interesting is it's the collective that usually moves it to, you know, the final state. And one of the things that, you know, a couple of the presentations we're talking about earlier this morning was the fact that they're really changing culture, creating lifestyle. And I think one of the keys to this industry-university collaboration is you have to move towards changing the culture and the lifestyle of your community in order for it to really and truthfully resonate and become a true collaboration. And you know, one of the things, I was actually at a presentation of Michael Crow's the other day. It was really interesting because Michael basically said, you know, in university space, you know, the 21st century big idea is collaboration. How do you get people across a university to collaborate? You know, one of the things we did, and this is my final point, is at Washington State University, we actually had a real challenging problem in our state because we had an $8 billion wine industry that really truthfully needed the science to take its wine industry to the next level. So, you know, we're in a state where, you know, since 2008, there have been cuts, our capital budgets have been cut. So the wine industry put up $20+ million to build a wine science center on campus, really to study the nuances of creating great wine. So on my campus, we have one of 3 wine science centers, which is strategically funded by the industry. So we've got 300+ industry partners who collaborate to create a change in the culture of our state so that we can become one of the world's leading wine industries in the world. So that's just one example of how industry universities can collaborate. You have to be flexible, you have to be opportunistic.
Thank you very much, Keith. That's a very good piece of advice. Now we'll go to Andy.
Punch, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Hamilton. I'm the president of NYU, have been for the last year and 3 months. And prior to that was the head of Oxford University in the UK. And you know, in listening to Keith and Punch's comments and the earlier talks today, you know, we all recognize it is hard to overstate the importance of university-industry collaborations. But of course, as Keith has emphasized, they very much have to reflect the conditions, the region, the opportunities that exist for a university, for the industry that are close to it. And those can be quite different in different settings. And in my 5 minutes, I'll just mention 2 very quick examples from the 2 universities I've been in most recently, NYU and Oxford in the UK. And NYU sits right in the middle of Manhattan. Most of it sits in the middle of Manhattan. That's not a place you would be thinking about the development of science parks, of greenfield sites for the building of lab buildings. But that's what's happening in Manhattan. There is a very major shift in the focus of the city. Finance is in decline. We all recognize, even with the stock market at record highs, the employment prospects in finance are shrinking. Automation is now becoming the dominant force in trading. And so you begin to see in New York City a very real emphasis on taking the incredible constraints of real estate in an environment like that and turning it to an advantage. And obviously, we heard in a previous speaker on the situation that exists in Cleveland within a major urban area, and Manhattan even has that further given the cost and the price of real estate. But it's something that with the political will, with the engagement of companies within the city, and very especially with the participation of universities, you can begin to see major progress being made. And already New York City is starting to attract industrial partners, Google, Facebook, major biotech collaborations. Pfizer now has significant research in Manhattan, in the Alexandria Center. There's a political dimension, as of course there always has to be, and you saw it in New York City. Many of you will have watched from afar as the Michael Bloomberg initiative that led to the establishment of Cornell Tech on Roosevelt Island in the East River. That for Cornell and Technion University in Israel is going to be a major new opportunity to bring industry in juxtaposition with university researchers. At NYU, we also were part of that Bloomberg initiative, and in our case, we had that we were awarded as part of the competition a major building, a 500,000 square foot building in Brooklyn. And for NYU, this has been part of the strategy, part of the industrial interaction strategy. We cannot be solely located in a single difficult environment like southern Manhattan. We also need to be in parts of the city that are more amenable to lab space, incubator space. One of those is Brooklyn. NYU School of Engineering is in Brooklyn and very successfully now is developing partnerships across that borough. And this major new building, which is called the MTA building because it was the Metropolitan Transport Authority. For NYU, it's about to become Media, Technology and the Arts, our MTA building, in which we will bring corporate partners, we will bring technology, and we will bring the arts. Of course, another key dimension in entrepreneurship in the city of New York. And so I think that commitment to ensuring that even within a difficult space, there are opportunities for collaboration, a word we've heard so many times today, and has to be reinforced, and the opportunities to build lab space, to build incubator space, to build maker space where industry and university activities can come together. Most of them at NYU, and I suspect most of them at the universities that we've heard from this morning, involve a more traditional relationship with industry, a relationship that involves investment in research, but also involves partnership that ultimately leads, and sometimes quite quickly leads, to intellectual property, confidentiality, the development of startup companies as a result of proprietary research. I just wanted very briefly to mention something that I think we should also all keep very much in mind as we think about university-industry collaboration, and that's completely different models of partnership. And there's a very powerful one taking place in my old university, Oxford, at the moment, and it's a partnership based on open innovation. This is in drug discovery, and there are many people who feel the contemporary model for drug discovery is broken. Many companies pursuing targets in disease that many failures in phase 2 and even staggeringly expensive failures in phase 3. And so there is a quite strong movement going on that in fact we should change the model for drug discovery around the world and be much more open in collaboration between universities and industry, open far further in the process of drug discovery, even into phase 1 and early phase 2 clinical trials. And this initiative at Oxford is called the Structural Genomics Consortium, and it involves about 12 companies, big ones, Pfizer, GSK, companies as well as some of the smaller biotechs in the region. They put very large sums of money into support research that is then completely open. It's done at the university. It's focused on structural elucidation of potential targets in disease. It's even based on the development of drug prototypes for those targets. Nothing is patented. Everything, crystal structures, structures of targets, even drug prototypes are immediately published on the web, are available for everyone to see. And it's a fascinating model that's been hugely successful, not only in terms of numbers of publications, numbers of new crystal structures, new drug leads, that then, of course, later in the process, when the money really starts hitting in phase 2 and phase 3, can be patented, can be protected, all of the things that industry needs. But for me, it's also been a hugely successful initiative in bringing industry money in. More than $40 million has come in now from those 12 companies who see it as a way of advancing knowledge in a more efficient and less damaging approach.
Thank you, Andy. Great comments. I appreciate that. Gary, now an industry perspective.
All right. I'm Gary Bronner. I'm Vice President of Research at Rambus. We're a small company in Silicon Valley, or modestly small anyway. I started my career at IBM and spent about 20 years there in the research lab and then in the product divisions. I think IBM, last time I checked, has annual revenue on the order of $80 billion. So that's my definition of a big company. And we're about 100 times smaller than that. So it's still sizable, but relatively small. When I was at IBM, IBM had these incredibly big research labs, the Yorktown Heights facility where they spent billions of dollars. So IBM viewed itself as very self-contained, and any money we spent on universities was really philanthropy. It was really trying to get programs working on topics that IBM cared about and getting a pipeline of students who would then come work at IBM. About 10 years ago, I left IBM and joined Rambus, and I noticed that Rambus was doing exactly the same thing. It was just doing philanthropy. The company was actually started by a couple of Stanford professors who were about 5 miles away from Stanford in Silicon Valley, and we did things like endow things, scholarships for students, that sort of thing. But we didn't really leverage the university for any kind of R&D, which, given the size of my company, I thought was a mistake, and I've been trying to change that since I've been there. And I thought I'd talk about a few of the R&D university collaborations that I've set up as examples of what works for me and the challenges and opportunities that those present. First of all, our company is global. We have offices and engineering around the world. Because it's relatively expensive to do engineering in the US, we have design centers in Bangalore, India. We've got offices in Rotterdam and Scotland. And our goal is to do the work where it's most efficient and where you can get the right talent. And in Silicon Valley, even though we call it Silicon Valley, it doesn't do very much in the way of silicon anymore at all. And my company is very much a silicon chip design company and system company. And every student coming out of Stanford these days wants to do software and computer science and work for Google or Facebook or their own startup. So if I want to do work that's relevant to my company, I actually can't work with the local universities anymore because the students don't want to work on what I work on. The three partnerships I want to talk about is one, actually working closely with Dartmouth and Eric Fossum, and we've had a very interesting collaboration on imaging technology. And that's a technology that's actually not core to what Rambus does at all. And I think the innovator's dilemma is a real problem for companies my size, where we can do very well our core business. I have great engineers to work on memory and system design. We also have a very strong security business. But getting into a new area, if I try and do that, there's tremendous political pressure inside my company that kills that. Because people ask, why am I spending any money on that at all? And finding a very experienced and strong collaborator like Eric Fossum has been a great way for us to explore that area, not commit too much of our resource, but still give a significant amount of money that helps him and his team move the technology forward and see whether or not that's something that makes sense for us or not. And I think the opportunities for us are either to think about eventually pulling something like that into our company, or if we really think it's an adjacency that we don't want to be core to our business, we can actually help companies spin things off and create new companies that we sponsor and help out, but we don't have to make ourselves too diverse and far away from our core, which is a hard thing to manage. Another collaboration that we have is actually in Ireland at the Tyndall Institute, which is part of University College Cork, which, if you haven't been there, is actually a beautiful university. And the reason I set that up is actually much more about personal relationships. The director of that institute actually is a friend of mine. He used to work at Rambus. And when he joined there about 4 years ago, he called me up and said, Gary, please give me some money. And so I said, all right, I'll give you some money. And we found a project we could work on together. But it's actually been great for us because in Ireland, they're very focused on creating jobs in Ireland. And they've got very smart students and great facilities to do much more of the hardware work that is no longer popular in the US. So it's been great for us. And then the third thing I'm sponsoring is a relationship I have with Tsinghua University in Beijing. And as you've probably read, the Chinese government has stated that their goal is to create a semiconductor industry in China, and they're spending on the order of $100 billion over the next 4 to 5 years to create that over what is essentially nothing at all. And so there's huge money over there funding that kind of R&D, and it lets us do some basic research that we couldn't fund on our own, and it gives us the opportunity to build connections in China that I think are going to be powerful, although I don't know exactly how they're going to play out, but just sort of building those connections and understanding the industry, I think is going to be quite valuable for us. So that's sort of what we try and do. Find areas where we can leverage resources, find areas where we can get universities that are interested in what we're doing, find professors that are really powerful advocates for what we want to do. And given the importance of that relationship to the professor and the networking to establish these relationships, I sort of look around this room, and one thing I notice is that it's very thin on industry people like me. So if you want to set up these partnerships, it might be a good idea to find a few more strong inventors and invite them as well, because I think they can help build that bridge much better than you can do talking among yourselves. All right, thank you.
Excellent points, Gary. Thank you. And now Terry, to startup venture capital kind of a perspective also.
Sure. My name is Terry McGuire. I'm a founder of a venture capital firm called Polaris, which is located here and in San Francisco, which is not a terrible surprise for venture capital to be in Boston or San Francisco. We've been in existence since 1996, and so we're just over 20 years old. I've been doing this business for about 30 years, and we manage a little over $4 billion, primarily in startup capital. What's been noteworthy about the Polaris portfolio is that it's diversified, so we do not just, I do life science investing, but our firm also does tech investing, but that we've really gone into the universities and been very involved in universities. For example, in the last 20 years, we've done more than 50 startups coming out of universities. Some of the names won't surprise you: Dartmouth, Harvard, MIT, but also the Scripps, Hopkins, Berkeley, and the University of Washington, just to name a few. And when I think about those relationships, I really want to come back to the point that was made by several of the speakers earlier, which is it's about people. And so actually, if you look at the relationships that we've had, they've been with specific investigators. George Whitesides at Harvard, we've done 2 investments with him. Lee Hood at the University of Washington, we've done an investment with Lee. Tom Manyanis at Columbia, we've done 2. Tilman Gerngross at Dartmouth, we've done 6. Paul Schimmel at the Scripps, we've done 6. And probably the most prolific inventor in academia right now is Bob Langer, and we've done 25 investments with Bob Langer. And so what I'd like to get the group focusing on is it's about a relationship between institutions, but at the end of the day, institutions are made up of people, and it's about relationships with people. And so what I've been fascinated to be part of is this sort of the emergence of the academic entrepreneur, actually like Eric or like Tillman or like Bob, that have come along who've stayed in the academy, continue to do incredible work in the academy, and yet to see a room for commercialization of their technology. Because at the end of the day, I think the most important thing that we can do is actually touch people's lives with our technology. And so if I want to, let me maybe dissect the Langer relationship for a second. As I said, it's 25 investments we've made over really 25 years. I actually started investing with Bob even before Polaris. We were probably in 30 disease states, the potential touching billions of lives. That collaboration has raised more than $1 billion for the commercialization of that technology, all outside of the academic realm. But to me, probably the most important part of the relationship, we call them family trees in Polaris, and so the Langer has a family tree. It's the collaborators that we touch alongside. So Justin Haynes at Hopkins, who was in Bob's lab, who came along, and now is starting companies out of Hopkins, or Omid Farrokhzad, who's at Harvard, and Omid starting companies, or Ram Sesasekaran at MIT. So it's these continuous relationships. And so for me, that's been the most powerful part of what we've done, is not just build companies that can hopefully change lives, but also educate these additional academic entrepreneurs who then go into their own institutions. And the thing that's also been striking, and again, I think Eric Fossum and Tillman Gerngross at Dartmouth, and by the way, I'm on the board of the overseers at the engineering school at Dartmouth, so I'm a little biased here, but how just two or three individuals can change the culture of an institution. This is the idea that you can actually start companies and get them done, and get funded and ultimately touch people's lives, I think is the true metric of success. So we've been successful as a venture capital firm. I'm really proud of that. I think we've generated the returns that are expected by our limited partners, our investors. But to me, the most important thing that we've done is help support some of these great academic entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Terry. That, again, is very, very valuable advice. So I just wanted to engage the panelists a little bit and then open it up for questions from the audience, which is what I would like to see more of. The first question I have is, to the academic folks here, Keith and Andy. When you look at industry partnerships, typically the focus is around the money thinking, the monetary thinking. This is what is going to bring more resources to the institution through that partnership. What value propositions do you see these days? Because that used to be the old model. What other value propositions do you see these days in engaging with industry as an institution? Andy, do you want to go?
Let me start. Many. They've been enunciated by a number of people today. The opportunity for our faculty to engage in real-world problems, to learn what the cutting-edge issues that industry is facing, whichever biotech, AI, materials, whatever the general focus is. That cannot be overstated. It's a critically important for our younger faculty to be aware of the areas that are the hottest, that are the most important in terms of questions to be solved. And then, of course, inevitably, the benefit of collaboration, the benefit of particularly younger faculty, but it reinforces throughout one's career of partnering, working in larger teams, being able with industrial partners to bring resources and technologies that would not have been available within the university setting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, one of the biggest benefits from industry-university collaboration will occur with your students. Your students, benefit from these collaborations in the classroom because our faculty members are more aware of the industrial setting. 95 to 98% of your students are going to end up in industry, especially if they're in science or engineering. I think another important benefit, and one of the things that both Case Western, VCU just touched on a little bit in both their presentations, is when you partner with industry, You can have strategic benefits for your students through industrial projects. The Harvey Mudd Clinic, when I was in California, we created strategic alliances with 25, 30 companies that really drove the ability for our students to increase their employability skills. We often in the academy, don't look at that as being the most important aspect because, we tend to want to, teach the science or the engineering or the arts or whatever discipline. However, in an era where, we are constantly having to be held accountable for, okay, so your students, what is their ROI? What's their return on investment? The academy is, constantly being pushed to say, okay, what is the benefit to my particular student given your tuition, your cost? And I think these industrial collaborations benefit us because when a parent sees that, oh, my child has the opportunity to go to a university that has collaborations with company X, company Y, or has a great opportunity for startups and collaborations, it just vastly benefits the student long term in terms of their ability to see their end goal, which is, typically to get a job or be employed for a long time.
Yeah. Now, I just want to follow up with the both of you again. You illustrated the value proposition, but oftentimes the industry collaborations are impeded by the fact that the faculty feel that that is not green enough as a money source, if it is resources that are coming from the industry. And so when it comes to serious decisions about tenure, promotion, or other kinds of advancement in the university, it does not necessarily get the same kind of credit. And in some institutions, maybe not in your institutions.
Punch, I think that's changing, and it has changed over the last decade, even 2 decades. Maybe in the 70s and 80s, there was a sense of purity of productivity. Mm-hmm. Even collaborations were always questioned because how could you determine in a young scholar what the contribution was? That now, the nature of modern research, the complexity of the problems that are faced, the multidisciplinary teams now involved, and of course, the interaction with industry, I think that that's changed. You see it in the nature of tenure decisions. Still, tenure is still there. That's not changed in 100 years, but tenure is still there. But you're seeing now a much greater openness to a wide variety of means of expressing scholarly excellence.
Thank you, Andy. Yes,
yeah, one thing that I've seen, at least at Washington State University, one of the things that we have is we have different types of faculty members. So you have your tenure track, we have our clinical faculty, and then we have our research clinical faculty. And I think one of the ways that we can balance this equation to assure that we can meet the needs of industrial collaborators, meet the needs of doing both basic scholarly research as well as applied research, is to have, a transformative model for, different types of faculty members. So in Washington State University, our clinical faculty members are, basically, on par in their departments with their other faculty colleagues. The only thing they don't do is vote on tenure decisions. However, they are an important contributor in all aspects of our infrastructure. So, for example, we have clinical teaching faculty members who primarily take care of the mission for our undergraduates and some of our graduate courses. Then we have our tenure track faculty members. Then we have our research faculty members. And that's one of the things that, at least at my campus, we're trying to exploit, is the ability to have research faculty members, especially given the fact that we have a national laboratory right next door. We have about 40 plus national laboratory folks who are holding that position, who jointly do research projects, partner on industrial collaborations. We have a large industrial collaboration around biofuels, bioprocessing. We have a building where we're jointly co-located with national laboratory members. We have students, we have industry coming in, providing us with projects. So these are the kinds of models that I think we're changing to, in accord with what Andrew was talking about, to really change the dynamics of how the university culture works and operates.
Great. Thank you, Keith. Gary, you talked about the 3 partnerships that you have formed, and they sound very exciting. So in your relationship with universities, what do you think that actually are things that work? And more importantly, what are the challenges that you believe in your life in IBM as well as now in Rambus, and you may have broader perspective of this also, that you face as an industry person coming in and trying to work with universities?
Well, I think the challenges are all related to how we measure ourselves and what our definition of success is. I think I've heard a lot of people say, well, if you want to be tenured, you need to publish X papers and get recognized for this or that and be the first in your field. And I think that, to me, that's sort of the metric saying that if you can do something, find something new and innovative, and it works 9 times out of 10, then you're completely successful. And if I did something that only worked 9 times out of 10, I would go out of business. So my metric for success is not 9 times out of 10, but 99.99999, however many 9s you want, and be able to do it reproducibly again and again and again. So I don't think that's wrong or right on either side, but you just need to recognize what each side is expecting to be the success criteria. And if that's not enough for what I need, for example, then you have to say, all right, once the university gets to that point, what's the next step? And I think the idea of startups out of universities is actually a great way of taking that next step, because probably it's not the right thing for a professor or a graduate student to spend 3 years refining an idea so it works reproducibly and you can actually sell it. But if a company is willing or a VC is willing to give money and give it a try, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't to that level for commercialization, but I think that's actually a great model for going forward.
Thank you, Gary. So, Andy, you mentioned something about the Oxford model of open innovation. And Gary, to that point, oftentimes the industry collaborations are always impeded by the IP negotiation. And we all talked about the fact that we all know that 90-95% of the IP doesn't see the light at the end of the day, but we fight over it, and for every little thing that we can get. So, how do you find interacting with the universities when it comes to IP, which essentially is an important thing for industry? So, how does it all work?
In my experience, I've now been in upper administration at Yale, at Oxford, and at NYU. I do think this is a slightly overstated issue. Now, you always get people complaining about universities being unbelievably hard to deal with. The people who've complained to me, I've had many CEOs come into my offices in those 3 universities complaining about how hard the university's tech transfer office. They immediately have a conflict of interest because they were in a commercial negotiation with the university and they didn't get everything they wanted. Well, I think you can only look at the success of American and some UK, Cambridge, Oxford, London are good examples of spectacularly successful universities that have also worked effectively with industry, who have been able to negotiate and get the kind of agreement over intellectual property that's necessary. No, it can't be denied. And we heard in the earlier speaker that for universities, IP, royalty income is a very significant part of what fuels our budget. At NYU, we are still getting the effects of a drug called Remicade, widely used for rheumatoid arthritis. Hundreds of millions of dollars as a result of a discovery in our medical school. And the idea that that would not have been negotiated professionally with appropriate return to NYU, all of which, of course, is being reinvested. None of it's going to shareholders. It's all being reinvested in the academic mission of the university. And if I can just comment on the last point, I do think there's something we all have to remember as we rush headlong into technology transfer and developing ideas coming from labs and elsewhere in universities. Universities are non-profit organizations. We are 501c3. We are required by law to have a non-profit mission. And so the